I was having a conversation this week with a friend, and we were talking about our journeys to the point of forgiveness, getting there. And so I asked him, I said, was your journey kind of a long, step by step process over years and years and years, and then you just kind of finally get there? I said, or was it just this like one day you wake up and something miraculous happens, changes your life forever? Because I've heard people say that, like that happens sometimes. I said, what was it for you? And he goes, yeah, I have to say that it's probably a combination of the both for me, like both things. And I go, yeah, that same with me. It was the combination of the two. I said, but tell me about yours. He says, well, I'll tell you about my miraculous moment. He said, I was at my mom's, and he goes, I had hit rock bottom, and I was sitting there kind of feeling sorry for myself, to tell you the truth. And he said, I looked over to the side, and my mom had a big bookcase there with books on it. And he said, I was drawn to the Bible that she had on the shelf. I said, wow, that's kind of weird. I go, all the books, you are drawn to the Bible. I said, how did that happen? How do you, of that one book, that's the one you are drawn to? He says, it's amazing because it's almost as if it was the only book on the shelf at that time. Although I know there were so many other books, but it's like the only one I could really, really see and pay attention to. I go, that's pretty cool. He goes, yeah, that's pretty cool. And so I said, what did you do next? He said, well, stop feeling sorry for myself. So I get up and I take the Bible off the shelf and I sit back down on the couch and just sat there with it in my lap. I said, is that all you did? He goes, nope. He says, I sat there with the Bible in my lap, and he said, I kind of started talking to God. And I just said, what do you want me to do with this book? Where am I supposed to open to? Of all the pages in here, where should I start? I've hit rock bottom. Where do I go from here? I said, and what did you hear next? You're not going to believe what I heard. I said, try me. He goes, all right. He said, in my heart, I heard God tell me Leviticus. And I looked at him and I said, Leviticus? You're looking for healing, and what you hear was Leviticus? And he goes, yeah. I go, you mean Leviticus, the book that talks about clean and unclean animals? The book that talks about ceremonial law and the responsibilities of the priests in the temple? He goes, yeah, we're talking about the same Leviticus. I go, okay, try me. Where did you go from there? He goes, well, don't ask me why, but I just opened to Leviticus 6. I go, cool, wonderful. What's that about? And he goes, that's about what you said. He said, it's about the responsibilities of the priests. And I said, okay, okay, what happened next? What did you do? He goes, well, at that point, he says, I was kind of drawn to just like, I looked at Leviticus chapter 6, and he said, I just kept looking, and he said, and all of a sudden I zoned in about verse 11. And I said, what does verse 11 say? And he had it memorized. I don't. So I'm just going to read it for you here. In Leviticus 11, okay, it starts with, then he, meaning the priest, he must take off these garments, change back into his regular clothes, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a place that is ceremonially clean. Verse 12. Meanwhile, the fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must never go out. And each morning, the priest will add fresh wood to the fire and arrange the burnt offering on it. He will then burn the fat of the peace offerings on it. And then verse 13, and remember, the fire must be kept burning on the altar at all times. It must never go out. So he told me that. And I said, okay. I've read Leviticus probably 3-4 times at least. And what I got from that is the priests have responsibility in the temple, right? He goes, yeah. I said, how do you get healing from that? I don't understand. He said, I normally wouldn't have understood it either. He said, normally I would have just read it and thought the same thing. It's like, okay, that's what the priest does in the the temple, and that's what they do with the offerings, and they have to keep the fire going. He said, but that one day I heard it differently. Hey, what did you hear? He goes, what I heard was, I heard God tell me, if you want to be healed, if you want a life of freedom, and if you want a life of forgiveness, your fire for me can never go out ever again. You have to keep it burning. This is so cool. This is so cool. And I said, this is amazing that you interpreted this passage in Leviticus like that. I go, this is a gift that you interpreted it that way. This is amazing. He goes, it changed my life. And so I said, how does it continue to change your life? What do you do now? How do you keep the fire burning? And he says, I read the Bible every day. I have to read it every day. That's my fuel. He said, it's like my lighter fluid. And he said, and then throughout the day, I continuously have my thoughts with Christ, and I'm praying throughout the day. And he said, it's become a joy for me. He said, what I thought would be difficult has just enriched my life, and I have never been happier in my whole life. He said, I don't want the fire to ever go out. He says, and I know if it goes out, I'll end up in rock bottom again anyway, so what's the point? He said, Leviticus changed my life. This is so cool. You know, everybody's searching for healing and forgiveness. And if you look hard enough, you can find it. Even in Leviticus. You have a good day. Bye.